All I have to do is remind her of the facts. Me personally, try to take everything into consideration, really look at the whole picture, and then give her the facts, give her the options. And like you said, then she makes that choice. And it's actually, for me, recognizing that right now is very beautiful. How wonderful that we don't have to scare them into making these decisions. It's empowering. It's only empowering, and it's beautiful.
Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. We are starting this episode off with a lot of technical stuff, and we've been giggling for the past 5 minutes. So our energy is high, and it's really good. We welcome back today Traci Doula from Alabama. Hi, Traci.
Hi.
Traci was just here in October, and we had one of the best workshops with local doulas here in San Diego. It was phenomenal, and I wanted to have her back to give her some feedback on how it's been working in our community. Everybody loved the training, first off, and we're going to be setting a new date up for next year for 2025. Traci, you're an amazing house guest. You're welcome anytime you want to come.
Thank you. I just almost moved. Like, I almost just like, hey, I'm coming. I'm just moving because the weather,
That's funny because me and Lydia almost moved to Alabama too. To probably
Well, if you guys switch, then someone's going to have really crappy weather and someone's going to have really good weather.
Sorry, I'm staying here.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice place. Once you come here, you're like, this is paradise. I know it's super expensive, but yeah, it's pretty. And Traci was a great house guest. She literally went to bed at like 7:00 because she's used to, Central Time. And I was like, well, what do I do tonight? It's like I have a free night. It was sad, but great at the same time. So Traci, can you give us a little blurb on what your training is for doulas and parents, kind of what we experienced? And then I want to go in with Lydia talking about her first experience. I'll introduce Lydia and Jenna in just a second.
Yeah. So Keeping Your Power for Doulas is a workshop that I poured my heart into, thinking about how we are so vulnerable going into these spaces as people first, and what we need to think about in our limitations and our challenges in our own lives, in our own personal space first. So I wanted doulas to remember that they are worthy of their personhood first, what challenges they had to think about in their own lives, and giving them a safe space to do so. We can get pretty emotional through that time of the workshop, but it's necessary to think and stop ourselves in our lives and think, I have some roadblocks and I can't overflow that onto my clients. So I really have to think about where I am in that space first. And then we talk about perspective and boundaries, and just being really solid for our families, and then communication and perspective, and it all overflowing into the scenarios of how do we bring that into conversations with staff that maybe we've been told not to talk to staff, or we're just scared of our place, or, we're just still trying to get our footing. So it's a powerful workshop. I love it. And I think that, every time I do it, I learn something from the community that I go to. And I feel just so very honored to be amidst of some really great birth workers. And it's just a really good time. I mean, it's a hard time, I feel like, but that's necessary in birth work, I feel like. And it helps doulas look at, hey, this just isn't showing up and pushing on backs and saying, hey, you can do this, because birth work is harder than that. And then Keeping Your Power for Families is making sure that we are centering the voice and the belief system of a family, but therefore we have to go deeper into their lives and making sure that they understand what their belief system even is. Because what if they were raised in a place where they didn't have a voice, or they weren't listened to, or they weren't able to exercise their own belief system? So in Keeping Your Power for Families, I break it down as, showing them that they are worthy and where do they think they are in that process. It's just a huge spectrum. I have a couple of exercises I do with them. And then showing them the system, like getting to know the ins and outs and navigating what the system is, home birth or hospital birth, and then giving them scenarios on these are the communication places that you need to talk to your provider, midwife or OB. These are the red flags to look for, and it gives them a sense of being when we are providing them the skills to be able to advocate for themselves, because self-advocacy is the default here. We are not, as doulas, going to advocate for everything. We are giving them skills to advocate for themselves first. So I think it's great, and I'm seeing some great things. I'm super thankful for Lydia and Jenna, and I'm just strapping in. I can't wait to hear.
It was a sexy training. And when I say that, it's not like sexy because we all had little bikinis on, not like that. It was sexy because it was deep and vulnerable and emotional. And all of us got to pour our hearts out. And for some of us, the first time we even tapped into that. So yeah, it was amazing. So Lydia and Jenna, can you introduce yourselves? We'll start with Lydia first.
Yeah, I live in San Diego. I've been a doula a little bit over a year, and I've done a lot in that year. It seems like I've been doing this a lot longer than a year. And I have a 7-year-old, and I homeschool her, and I doula, and that's my life. And I hang out with Jenna. That's what I do every day,
Literally.
every week on repeat.
Yeah, they kind of
Um,
have become attached at the hip, which is great. They're a perfect pair.
She's my
Jenna,
emotional support human.
Straight up. I don't know what I would do without her, literally. Yeah, my name is Jenna. I'm a birth and postpartum doula in San Diego. I also have been doing it a little over a year. I've done a lot, not quite as much as Lydia, but plenty for sure, where I feel like I'm really starting to find my footing. I don't hold on to that too much though, because I feel like every day my footing is ripped out from underneath me as a birth worker. And that's probably one of the reasons why I'm so grateful I took Traci's class. But yeah, I love it. I'm recently discovering I really like working with first time moms. I think that that's really, really fun. I think we connect really well. And I actually love working in hospitals. A lot of birth workers are like, I'd so prefer a home birth or birth center. But I like the hospitals because it's fun to go in there, especially after Traci's training, and be like, no. And not that I'm saying it for them. You can't do that to her, but you can't just say whatever you want and do whatever you want to them. And so I'm loving it. I love this job. And all I do is doula and hang out with Lydia, just like her. That's all we do.
I think one of the things that doulas discover in some of the trainings that we take, don't advocate, keep your mouth shut, stay small. This isn't your birth. It's not your job, blah, blah, blah.
It's not your scope.
It's not your scope. We're just scope. And we're not allowed. I know, Traci, like it's right here, isn't it? Yeah. When we say that,
Yeah.
we don't have a scope because we're not medical practitioners. We're emotional support and physical support and spiritual support. But parents are hiring us to be an advocate for them. And being an advocate doesn't mean we are speaking for them. Once we have the conversations of what do these things mean to you and how do we implement that together, that's advocacy. And we talked about that in the training, that there are different levels of advocacy, and it doesn't need to advance to level 3 if you have worked a really good birth scenario in the front and built the team and gotten everybody on board with how are we going to work to keep this family centered. So, and Traci, you feel free to jump in whenever you want, but I want Lydia to start with her first story of where this has all helped her.
Yeah. So I'd been working with this family well before I took the training. So I only had one prenatal with them before their birth after the training, and it happened to be the Monday after. And I'm pretty close with the family. So I had told them I'm taking a training. And then one of the things was, she was like, how was the training? And I was like, it was amazing. And we just kind of went over, I gave them like a crash course on everything I had learned. And then she had her baby shortly after. And I ended up being there at the birth for over 24 hours, which is a long birth for me. I'm not typically there that long. Like 10 hours is like a long birth for me. So it was exhausting. I slept like, not even joking, like maybe 11 minutes during the whole thing because mom and dad got to sleep and then nurses were coming in. And so I just did not end up sleeping. But I left that birth feeling just so like I wasn't mentally exhausted, and I didn't do the like coulda, woulda, shoulda game on my drive home. I just was like, we did the best we could. And there was a midwife there who she was there upon check-in, and I got there shortly after they checked in. And she came back and she was ending up being the delivering midwife. But she was fine. Her bedside manner just really wasn't it. And I don't know if it was just a personality thing or what, but she came in and I did have the conversation. She was kind of prefacing a C-section after all this time. Water had been broke and everything. And so I wanted to try a spinning babies move. And she was like, well, that's kind of our last ditch effort. And the baby doesn't tolerate that very well. And I'm like, the whole time I'm having this conversation with her, I'm like shaking in my boots because I was like, is this even the right thing I need to do in the first place? But I was like, I had been texting other doulas, like asking suggestions on just to get this baby to move down. And mom had been working so hard. And so that she wanted to do Walters is the one that I had decided. I was like, okay, she had an epidural. And the nurses knew spinning babies this whole time we're doing it. And so I had mentioned to the nurse first, and she was like, I think that'd be a good idea. And then the midwife came in, and the nurse no longer, like, kind of just stood there, like, and I was like, we just talked about this. We just agreed on this. And
She
again,
doesn't want to get in trouble.
yeah, she was like, the baby just doesn't tolerate it. I'm like, well, how do we know if we try? Because you're telling us right now that you think the only option is a C-section. So why don't we try this other option? And we ended up doing it, and the baby tolerated it just fine. And he was out 45 minutes later with no C-section. And afterwards, and just the whole experience, I felt like being there. When I had first got there, I was helping the dad set up the lights. I had brought a light, and he was like having trouble with the couch. So we're setting that up, and the nurses happened to come in at the same time. And normally I am by the mom, but just in that moment, the nurses came in there. And so I'm still listening to what they're saying as I'm helping the dad. And they just disregarded my existence completely, which actually my client noticed. And I had stepped towards the mom and I was like, hey, I'm Lydia, I'm the doula. And the mom had already she was in the middle of saying that. And so I felt like that, did make a difference. And they were like, I'm not going to stand here and be ignored. The dad, it was actually like further back in the room. I'm the first point of contact there, and it was like I was not even there. But I didn't let that bother me. I just, introduced myself, and every time they would come into the room, we'd have a shift change. We would introduce everybody. Mom got too tired, so I ended up, being like, hey, this is mom, this is dad, and I'm the doula. And I felt really good about the whole thing afterwards.
It feels different when you have the confidence to say who you are and that you're a real human being in the room and part of the birth team.
Yeah, which is weird because I never really felt like I'm not really a small person. Like I don't ever shrink back. I felt like previously, but maybe I had been and not like really realizing it. So I just made it more of a point to be there and to be like, I am here. And I felt good about it. I said, and afterwards, I mean, it was a long birth, really, really hard. I had messaged you. This is what I messaged you about, that I was just like, the drive home, I happened to be driving home in rush hour too. And I'm a long processor. It takes me a long time to process things. And so even now I feel really good about, how everything went. And I really do think that if I hadn't had the conversation with the midwife like that, and I don't feel like I was speaking for the mom. She didn't know what that move was, and I did. So I feel like, I was just opening a conversation, and it ended up working out.
Right. I mean, and I think that's what we're doing, is we're breaking that illusion of we've been conditioned. We really have been conditioned as doulas that we're way down here. We're not a part of the team, or we shouldn't speak out of turn, or we shouldn't take away from somebody else. Like if we even introduce ourselves, we're taking away from somebody or something. And I just think it seems very simple. It doesn't have to be this firework explosive thing that we have kind of created. We don't all have to like come out high-fiving after a birth. We'd love for that sometimes to happen, but it's the small things that are going to be huge in the outcome of you saving your self-care and not having to think, yes, you're a long processor, but it's like, man, I feel really good about knowing that I am the expert in what I know. And the mom didn't know to ask all the, hey, what else can we do? And the midwife was already saying, baby's not going to tolerate this. So it is our job to say, hey, if we're all on the same page here with trying to be on this one road of not maybe having a cesarean. Hey, let's try this. And if baby's not tolerating it, baby's not tolerating it. It's not like we're ignoring what they're saying, right? That's the using perspective. I love that. I love that, Lydia. I think that that's just, it gives me chills really when the courage and the bravery comes out and we don't realize, because this is not hard for me either. And that's what people I think is, oh, you got this covered. No, I'm nervous every single time. I'm like, it's just not always easy because you don't know how the information is going to land, but that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to come up with, hey, I'm just having conversation. And you even said, it worked out. Well, what if she didn't take that information well? Then it would have been, hey, well, let's talk to mom and see what she wants to do, right? So, it's not being afraid of the landing either. And that's great. And it reminds me of, you just said it, I am here. It reminds me of the song Pink sings. She sings, I am here. I am here. And I'm not going anywhere. So we might as well all work together for the good of our client.
Right. And I feel like the clients are putting their trust in you, and previous trainings, certification trainings, they completely skip over that. And that's a big responsibility to have. And if you're not even made aware of that, but it also helps in, feeling like you need to be there when they're eliminating that responsibility for you in previous trainings. And then you go and you're like, you don't even feel like you're supposed to be there because you're like, oh, just standing there is enough. And it's not. You have this big responsibility that a lot of doulas aren't even aware of. And that can be detrimental as much as it can be empowering, and I think that is missed a lot. And so that was something that connected for me, especially in this birth, because I don't feel like I did anything like, there were no fireworks, and the dad was doing a lot of the physical stuff. I was not, other than just like sitting there kind of helping him out. It was just that I was being aware of all of the things happening for them so that they could do that.
I like too that because of the training and you practicing, saying, hi, I'm Lydia, I'm the doula, and just being who you are as a human to human, that you weren't necessarily going to be activated by a negative response. You're like, I'm here. This is who I am. And that the courage and participation of owning who you are in your own space, being part of that team. Like we had that diagram of, doula mom and dad, or mom and partner together. And we three come in as a team, makes a huge difference in how we feel grounded in our energy, which holds the space in the room for the parents.
Yeah, I think that even in the training, that was my favorite thing, was the diagram. Like, I was just so happy to have a visual, and I was like, yeah, I will bring that, to the room and everything, because it is important, and, for everybody, the parents. And I feel like it helps the parents know, like, you genuinely are on their team. That's what they're hiring you for.
Yeah, so good. Okay, Jenna.
Okay, yeah. I have a really great story. I'm really, really, really excited to share this story because my mama, she went through a lot. They put her through the ringer, and she kept her power the whole time, all the way through to the end, to the birth of the baby. So this is, for me, was really exciting to be a part of. But this is an induction story about a mama who, in my terms, she didn't leave in the middle of an induction, but to hospital terms, she definitely left in the middle of an induction, and it caused a major wave in the hospital we were at. But she started getting advised that she should get an induction at 32 weeks with no issues in her pregnancy whatsoever. Her baby was so healthy the whole time. There was one high blood pressure reading in the beginning, and she had a slight history of high blood pressure. And then at her 38-week appointment, she had 2 high blood pressure readings. And so then now she enters into the category of gestational hypertension. And so they were like, we really, really think you should get an induction today. And she did not want to do that. And so her and I had a conversation, and she ended up going home that day, which was the 29th of, I had to write notes because it was a lot. It was the 29th of October at her 38-week appointment. They said she had gestational hypertension. They warned mom and baby. She had 9 individual conversations with 9 individual caregivers about why she should have an induction. And this was the first conversation she had. They're talking about seizures and strokes, her baby dying, her dying, like all of the stops. So that was the first conversation she had. And she was like, no, I want to go home. And I would like to monitor at home. So we go home, and I was there at the appointment because her husband is deployed at this time because she had no one here. So I went there with her. We did the appointment together. She decided she wanted to monitor at home. And so that's what we did. We bought a blood pressure cuff. She didn't monitor the next day because they wanted her to go into the fetal assessment unit another time that week to be assessed, of course. And so we went in the next Thursday. So it was Tuesday, the first appointment. Thursday was the next appointment for the fetal assessment unit. There was one high blood pressure reading. She has white coat syndrome. We found out after everything that we've been through, she has white coat syndrome really bad. One high blood pressure reading. And then the next one after that, the next several after that, we're totally fine. They're still like, we really think you should be admitted today for an induction. She's like, no, we're just going to do the blood pressure cuff and do a couple of readings. Like, okay, if you get 2 over 140, we really think you should come back. So the next day is Friday. She has 2 readings in the morning that are over 140. And so she did decide to go in for the induction that Friday. And so we get to the hospital around 2:30. They don't start the induction till like 6:30. And in between that time, she has 2 more conversations with 2 other caregivers about why she should stay there and whatnot. And then, so that's like 4 or 5, actually 4 conversations she's had now about induction. And so she's like, I'm already here. Like, let's just do it. So we get the induction started around 6:30 p.m., which while we were waiting all those 4 hours, she's like, it's really weird because we were really rushing. And now like everything is taking so much time. And I'm like, yeah, classic. It's classic. It's how it is every time. I've heard it more than once. And so we get into the induction and we're getting things going. And she chose to do Cervidil, 2 rounds of Cervidil, which was from CARE's Induction 101 course. And I taught her about that. And she wanted to do the Cervidil twice. And that's not that hospital's method either. So they're like,
because that's
okay.
slow and steady. And they're like, no, we're going to rush you. We're going to hit you with everything.
Yeah. So they didn't love that, but they were okay to let her try it. So we did the first round of Cervidil. We started at 6:30 p.m. And then we're going through, we're obviously in the hospital. It's me and her spending the night there. She doesn't sleep a wink. And I slept, maybe a teeny tiny bit in that process. She's just sitting in a hospital bed. Her labs were perfectly fine. She doesn't sleep the whole night. And then around 3 a.m., I'm like officially up. And this is Saturday morning at 3 a.m. I'm officially up, and her and I sit there for like a couple more hours, kind of just doing our own thing. She's trying to rest if she can. She's not really. And during that time, I'm sitting here thinking, and this is when I start applying Traci's work the most. I let her advocate for herself in the beginning, but she wanted to go for the induction. And of course, be supportive of that. So I'm laying there on the hospital couch bed thingy, and I'm like, this is so not right. Her bishop score was a 1 to 2. Her husband wasn't there yet. She wanted him to be there so bad. Her blood pressure was fine. Her baby is fine. Like everything that you would take into consideration is on the positive end right now. Everything looks good. So I sat there for a couple hours like, should I tell her that she can go home? Like that she doesn't need to be here? It's scary as the doula to do that because I'm not a medical professional, and these medical professionals are scared out of their wits that something's going to happen to her and her baby. So I'm like, I don't know what to do here, but it did not feel right. The energy in the room between me and Nicole was not right. Not between me and Nicole, but being there. It was all thrown off. Everything felt whack. And so we wake up officially in the morning and I'm like, Nicole, I just want you to know that you do not have to stay here. You don't have to stay here. And her and I had several discussions back and forth, like several. That's another thing I think people don't warn you about as a doula. When we're advocating and we're doing what's right for our clients, you're having discussion after discussion with them because they need to talk it through. Because now you've opened up a whole door of options for them that truly goes against what their caregiver is saying. And also why building the bond at the beginning before labor is so important, because they have to have a certain level of trust in you to even be open to having those conversations and listening to what you have to say. And so that was super important for me. I did spend time with her prenatally after our course and focused on building that trusting relationship with her more so than I even was. And I think it made a huge difference when we were having this conversation about whether or not she was going to leave the hospital right now, because we knew that was a big deal. And so she does decide that she wants to go home. We tell one caregiver, And we tell a nurse and they're like, oh, we can ask. I don't know how they're going to feel about it, but we'll see. She tells the caregiver. And of course, they're like, absolutely not. They have the scariest conversation in the world with her. They hate it. They don't want her to go. And she's like, well, we're going to be switching around soon. I'm going to have a meeting with some other doctors in a little bit here.
So quick question, just clarification. Has
Yeah.
the Cervidil done anything? Had they done 2 rounds now? And
No. No. And that's why, like, in my end, we didn't leave in the middle of induction just because we left when the Cervidil round was done. She wasn't in labor. She didn't want to keep going. So we were like, okay, well, didn't work. Let's go home. You know what I mean? Part of the reason why I told her that I think we should go home is because she hadn't slept at all. And they were about to start another round of Cervidil. She wasn't going to sleep again for a whole another 12 hours. That's more than 24 hours without sleep. And then go into the marathon that we call labor. This was like, for a birth worker, this is screaming C-section, you know, that low Bishop score, super tired mama. Her cervix was still quite posterior. It was just, so yeah, she was like, we're going to have some meetings with the other caregivers. So they'd switch shifts and the next caregiver comes in, they do her spiel again about, no, we don't really think you should do this. And actually the caregiver at this point said, the only reason why I would consider letting you leave. And I said, and I look at my client and I'm like, this is completely your choice. No one is making you stay here. If you want to go home, you want to go home. And actually by this point, we had this conversation so many times and she had told them so many times that I was like, you want to go home. It's okay that you want to. But she had told me over and over again, and they kept trying to change her mind. And I'm like, it's okay. This is what you want. And I just was like, I'm not going to have you sitting here saying to my client that the only reason why you're considering letting her go home, she is her own human being. That is her body. Those are her legs to get herself up and walk on out of here if she wants to. So then she had some aunts and a cousin come down from up north in Cali, and they had slept the night at her house that night. And they came back Saturday morning to come get her to take her home. And once they got there, I was exhausted. So I was like, okay, guys, I'm going to go. Because she had already signed the AMA papers and everything. I was like, I'm going to go. And so I left. And then when I left, they sent in another caregiver. The mom texted me. She was like, they sent in another caregiver. It was cray. The biggest thing that stood out for me in this experience with her is that the amount of coercive language that was going on to convince her to do this, and the fact that she didn't do it anyways. You know, we started the induction, whatever, but when it really came down to what she truly wanted, we left. And then I didn't text her all week, actually, because I didn't want to be like, when is dad getting home? Because I didn't want to jinx it or like anything. And so she had sent me a couple messages, a couple updates. I did ask her how she's doing, but I didn't ask about dad. Dad gets back on the 7th, which is the following Thursday after that Saturday. And she goes into spontaneous labor Sunday. That next Sunday on the 10th.
Blood pressure readings, had they been good all that week?
Her blood pressure readings were totally fine that whole week. She was fine. There was nothing going on. We literally created, I actually saw something online a little bit ago. Someone, like a midwife somewhere, said, risk factors are not predictions. And that made me think about this birth so much. They were acting as though these couple blood pressure readings were predictions for what was going to happen to her and her baby, and use that to absolutely scare the hell out of her, even though numbers and everything were telling us that everything was okay and that baby was okay. She's so sweet because she's like, I know that they just care and they're just, you know, doing what they were taught. And I actually, when I say that to my families, I don't demonize caregivers to my families ever. Because they really are doing what they feel is right and safe and best for these families. And so, yeah, the coercive language was just really out of control with that one. And she had her baby vaginally on 11/11, and her husband was there. She wanted to see what it felt like to have a vaginal birth. She got to have a vaginal birth. She wanted to see what contractions felt like. She got to have her contractions. She got an epidural. That's the thing. This isn't a mama who was like, oh, I want a super holistic birth. She just wanted to have the things that she wanted. She wanted to experience a couple things. And you will hear hospitals say to parents, our goal is to have a healthy vaginal birth. But they skip over the fact that they don't give two Fs what it takes to get there. And even if it's not a vaginal birth, ultimately they just want a healthy baby and mama. And so if you want a holistic birth, they're like, yeah, sure. But they don't really care if you have a holistic birth or if you have this experience or that experience. They care that you and your baby survive, which we all care about that too. But there's no reason to jump to the conclusion that something bad is going to happen. I would think ultimately over anything, healthy baby, healthy mom, which is what we all want to. But I feel like it always is taken to the extreme with caregivers where they're like, yes, it's nice that you want these experiences, but that's not a need. A need is a healthy baby and a healthy mama. And for me, the way I look at it is I'm like, no, that is a need, because when she is reliving this story over and over again in her head after she's had her baby, she's going to wonder, why couldn't I have these simple things that I wanted? They're so quick to just take it away without really any regard for the emotional aspect of it. We're all just always focused on only the physical, like the mental isn't as just as much a part of it as everything else. There was also one thing, we really made waves in that hospital by leaving that induction. They had meetings about it. And when we did come back for the birth, the midwife that was on call that day was not on call when we were there for the induction. And she was like, oh yeah, I heard all about it. And she said to mom and me and dad, the only reason why I was comfortable with that is because you had an expert here, and pointed to me. We had been in labor already, in the labor process for hours and hours at this point. So it didn't register for any three of us that she said that. And Traci, this would probably be the one thing I walked away from this birth, kind of like analyzing how I treated it. And it was, I felt that I should have in that moment been like, this isn't because of me. This is not because of me. I let her know what her option was, and she chose to leave, even though you guys were bombarding her with scary facts and making her concerned about the choice she had to make for her baby and whether or not you have to choose whether or not you're okay with killing your baby. And actually in the one postpartum meeting we've had so far, because they just had the baby, but we had one meeting and I brought it up to them. I was like, I don't know if you guys remember the midwife saying that. It was during the pushing phase too. She was pushing and I was like, what a strange time to choose to steal someone's power away from them. They're like, yeah, if it weren't for her, you couldn't have done this. And I said to the family, I was like, I want you to know that I'm sorry that I didn't say that in that moment, that this is all for you. But just know everything that happened in your whole entire story and you getting everything that you wanted was because you stuck up for yourself. You were so strong, so beautiful, and so awesome, and had the most beautiful, healthy baby. And her husband got to help catch the baby. He got to cut the umbilical cord, all of these things that they were this close to missing out on. There's a really fine line, I think, in doula work that is hard to find. And I think sometimes when they're like, just being there is enough in itself, it can be helpful, but truthfully, there's a lot of things that when you don't know what's going on or don't know how to hold yourself in that space, like Lydia said, it can be problematic. You can cause problems and or miss really, really important moments where you can really help someone to make a decision that can change the outcome of their birth. You're not making it for them, but you're letting them know, like, hey, you can do that, and then teach them how.
Keeping the family centered, no matter what's going on, and coming back to, but what does she want? What is she telling me? What is she telling you? What does she want? And sometimes that reflection can be taken roughly, but it's, what does she want?
What does she want?
Traci, you did a really good job in helping us with that in the training.
Well, I think that there is a balance, because we have to be responsible for what we know, and we have to be responsible for what we say and how we say it. And in the story, you're going to have, Jenna, if you just tell your story, you're going to have doulas that are like, you should have never said A, B, and C. And then you're going to have other doulas that are like, well, of course you should, give all the options, because if you don't get all the options, then you're just gatekeeping information and those kind of things. And it's how we frame things, and it's how we center our families into, here are your options. This is why you hired me. This is the things that I know, but it's absolutely your decision in your critical thinking and getting to a confident yes or no. And you did that. I didn't do that. I might just have helped you along the way. And that's what doulas do. We are guides. We are going through this journey with them. So the midwife that said, hey, we're only comfortable because they had an expert with them, that is taking the responsibility and putting it on you. And so if something bad happens, then they can say, oh, doulas don't give medical advice. Which is it? Stop saying that we are the experts, because we're not. We're just guiders, and we just want you to respect our families. And on the flip side, give us the respect that we do have the relationship with our families. So it's either or. That's what I'm saying. It's that black and white thinking of what is a doula, and if they're accepting us, then they're pushing us into this place where we shouldn't be, because we don't give expert advice. We're just saying, hey, in this situation, here are the things that we know. And in
Yes.
my experience, I'm seeing a rushing train here. How do you feel about that? Do you feel good about being here? Do you not feel good about being here? Here are the things that we know. Here are the things that we have done. And then giving them a safe space to make the decision, because there is a super big difference in saying, this is what your options are, this is what you can do, and this is what I think you should do.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. And that's what's being like slammed at us, like out of context and those kind of things. And in my trainings, that's why it's super important, that relationship, that first step, that relationship and that bond that you have is not only building trust, but it's also breaking the codependent habits of, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just helping you figure out how to get to the place that you're making the decisions that are right for you. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because you're like saying, in my experience, I see a train wreck coming. As a doula, you don't have to say that. I never told her, I think this is going to end in C-section. All I have to do is remind her of the facts. Me personally, try to take everything into consideration, really look at the whole picture, and then give her the facts, give her the options. And like you said, then she makes that choice. And it's actually, for me, recognizing that right now is very beautiful. How wonderful that we don't have to scare them into making these decisions. It's empowering. It's only empowering, and it's beautiful.
Well, and isn't it interesting that because the bias can be on both sides, because we see care providers coercing because they are seeing a worst case scenario, and we're seeing that coercion is the worst case scenario. So we're both seeing the same thing, right? But if we were both centering the family and doing the physical and the emotional, because the reason we get worried about high blood pressure is preeclampsia is, the root word for that is lightning, because it can switch quickly. Right. And so they have seen worst case scenario, right? And we've also seen those inductions that were unnecessary that, boom, were worst case scenario, and we had a cesarean. The bias can be on both sides, but if we're both working towards, how do we center this person? How are we looking at the facts? What are the safeguards we can put in? It would be a totally different conversation. But we both have our ideal roles of who we think we are in the birth room, instead of centering that family right off the bat, which is what we should be doing.
I want to add that, in Traci's training, she talks about, and actually Care also has, I've learned this from her as well, where you guys talk about trusting your intuition. Like, this is so real. This is something that I'm learning so hardcore as a new doula. I feel like I already felt a little bit in my life. I had that understanding before I became a doula, but now that I'm a doula and I really, really see that I need to apply it, my life is changing, and I see people's lives changing. When I said to Care the other day, I'm like, seeing these things, like these people go through these and change and grow so much is magical. I in that moment, I sat there and I'm thinking, should I tell her she can leave this hospital? My intuition, this is what I was talking about, that weird energy. My intuition was like, oh, this does not feel good. And Nicole's intuition was telling her, this does not feel good. And before she got to this induction point, I had said, let's trust your intuition. And now I always would say, I trust you over anybody else. But since that training, I'm like, I trust what you're saying. If you say something is going on, I believe you, and we're either going to get to the bottom of it if it's a problem that needs to be solved, or we're going to get you what you want if it's something that you want.
I feel
And
like I have watched Jenna like kind of come to the realization. Like I think the first time I really noticed it, we went to lunch with another doula, and Jenna has always been, she needs the facts, the cold hard, she needs the numbers. And the other doula and I were talking about like how we would trust another mom, like a mom's advice over, you know, a number that says something. And like in the conversation itself was about like how that makes, you know, people radical. And it really shouldn't. Like I don't feel like I'm a radical person. And I don't think really neither does this other doula. And Jenna, you can
I'm
see her shrink
I'm
into herself, and she's like, "What the fuck? Like, what do you mean?" Because it was just such a big thing for her, um, to be like, you know, the number wouldn't support that, or you know, there's nothing. Everything you're seeing is supporting that, and there is evidence for a lot of things on both sides. But it's just so interesting to see her because I came into this from my own birthing experience. I love meeting
Mhm.
doulas that don't have children and seeing why they're coming into this work, and just watching Jenna like be like, "Yeah, I know what I'm talking about," and like maybe nobody else does. It's just so fun to see her like feel like, "Yeah, I've got this." Like I feel like honestly, since that lunch, everything has like shifted for you. And that lunch happened to be near the training as well. So it was just all like it all lined up as it needed to.
Yeah, and actually, no, Lydia, you said it right in the training. So it wasn't the lunch that changed it, actually, because we were talking about evidence-based information and how I do rely heavily on. I'm like follow the evidence because, like Lydia said, I'm a very numbers person. I'm very follow the facts. And when we were at the training, you had us do the thing about our bias and how we feel about and how the importance of such and such in birth. And with evidence based, the most important. And you know, we had our discussion about it, and Lydia in that moment, she was like, "I just feel like you have to be right." And I was like, I just feel like you have to be right, like it's black and white." And I'm like, that's the moment for me that it clicked, I think, officially, because I was like, oh my God, no, you're right. I'm seeing everything in such black and white, and this is right or wrong, which that's how I was raised. There's a right and a wrong way for everything. And so I was totally bringing that in to my offering as a doula. And this is one of the major reasons why I love Lydia so much, because she's like, you don't have to be right. It's not black and white, girl, you know? Take a step back. And
Mhm.
that was a huge thing for me in that we went over our
Yeah.
biases, those impact, even when I thought I was doing so good too. You're so funny. It's so
The
funny.
the levels, so the you know, and this is not really magic, but it seems simple, but it is hard. The levels of self-awareness is what we're talking about, right? It's like, I thought I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm doing a great job in my life, right? But if we can get past the two-dimensional, go three-dimensional and even fourth, like if we can get to a really high, you know, sense of self-awareness, then we can be like, "Oh, I thought I was doing just a really great job." And you are, but can we get even deeper and have that powerful place of, okay, I do have this bias, or maybe I do have this trauma or whatever, or this like unhealthy sense of I just want the birth and I want to be codependent with my clients. I want to feel needed or whatever that is, and it twinges just a little bit, but once we learn that and practice it over and over again, that's just the powerful part of, wow, I am really 100% allowing my families to do exactly what they need to do. And I didn't tell them a thing, or I feel good about the information that I told them. And when we're all in this together, it's like we are rippling this through our communities. And that's why this is just like keeping your power in the process. And we're changing minds, we're changing lives, we're changing birth outcomes. And I want that category of first-time parents not to go through trauma. I don't wanna
Mhm.
just have doulas getting the seconds and thirds like, "Okay, well, what's your birth goal?" I know what I don't want because I just went through it. No, I want the first-time parents that are keeping their power the whole way through it, not only in that process, but then in parenting. We are showing them their skills to where they're getting ready to have babies, maybe in the NICU, maybe at pediatrician appointments, maybe in preschool, maybe having to figure out what they're going to do with their kids long term, and they're keeping their power in that process too. That is going to keep with their whole lives.
And I've
It's just-
noticed too, Tracy, in my teaching, because I do a ton of advocacy training, but your training gave me different wording to use that has been more powerful. Like we can go deeper into beliefs where before I just didn't have that word, and that word of, well, what's your belief around that? Well, and then we can dive deep with what they are feeling and what, they're hearing on both sides of their families and how that's made up. It's like, well, is that really how you feel, or is that what your parents are saying? Is that what your sister-in-law is saying? And sorting that through has been monumental in my classes, and I'm watching it change families that can't come in very quiet and I'm just going to have this birth, I just want the information, but then they realize they do need to step up and figure out what their belief system is, how they can get on the same page. And we were doing that before, but it's just in a deeper sense now. And I noticed that I have a student that Jenna is also their doula, and she came in very hesitant and quiet, wanting to learn. They're amazing couple. They're so great. And she got the same thing in a prenatal. Dead baby card, you're 100 years old, this is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And she said, okay, no, thank you. And no, thank you. And nope, I'm not going to do that. Well, that's fine if you're okay with your baby dying. And she said, yep, I know the numbers. I'm okay with it. And of all the people, for her to step up like that and be so confident in it, I was like, oh my gosh, I did energetic backflips, like as she was talking about it. And the other couples were like, she said your baby was going to die. And I said, you guys, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass when I tell you that is a normal conversation. And sure as heck, 2 more couples had the same conversation within the next week with their providers. It's just what happens. And I understand it on both sides. But they had the evidence, they had the numbers, they had their gut instinct that I'm okay and everything's okay. And when it's not, then I'm open to making up, different decisions. But taking out that activation point or that triggering point holds the power inside you. It's just been a beautiful experience to watch that happen over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the community after the training, Jenna had posted something on a Facebook group asking for help for resources for one of her clients that she did not have. And there was somebody that commented on that and had said something about, well, I don't know even like why you're asking, this is out of your scope. And that was very triggering, for the both of us, especially. But you had said, there is no scope. And so Jen and I, we got heated for a moment with each other, not with the post. And then she answered it so eloquently because she was pissed. Like she was so pissed when they said that, and she processed that. And then she answered and she was like, she's just wanting to find help for these clients. And you would think being able to ask a group of other birth workers, you would get the help. And it's not, unfortunately, the case. So the training, even helping in a professional sense, is.
And I love that you
important.
did, because I did see that post too. And I thought, oh, that was the wrong person to say that to. And
I went off.
Jenna and I have worked a lot on, we don't have to be right.
Yeah.
Like we can be the villain in somebody's story. It's totally okay. And so I really appreciate the fact that you did process it off and think, wait a minute, like she's coming from her angle, I'm coming from my angle. I'm just going to explain my point of view, and then close the doors on that. Professional and loving each other is how we're going to get through those different differences of opinion. And sometimes it's just different wording, right? And we're being misunderstood, but we're capable of having adult conversations without being activated, and also respecting what they say. And if they respect what we say, cool. If not, not a big deal. We're okay with being the arch enemy of somebody if we need to be, because it's not about that. It's not about being right.
What the
It's
goal
weird
and the
because they
benefit.
deleted the conversation.
Well, because they knew that they were wrong, probably.
And that's why I was like.
And sometimes, obviously in groups, you don't want to start getting a heated discussion with people. Right. So even admins will take things down like that. But allow it to be what it is, because we're all coming at it from what we feel is right. And, and no harm, no foul. Like we're all going to do what we need to do, but we can still respect each other.
Everybody has the right to their own perspective. And that's one reason why we go over perspective in the workshop. And it isn't about I'm doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. It's about we're doing things two different ways. And when somebody like challenges us, because y'all don't think I get that, like I get that stuff all the time. Okay. And if I have the energy, because you don't have to give everybody your energy, first of all. Second is what I'm gonna say be a benefit or is it not? You can choose to ignore a comment. But also, I feel bad for doulas who are still stuck, because y'all have to remember, I've been doing this for years with the same language. It's not your scope. We shouldn't advocate all the things that we talk about in the workshop. Years, probably 7 by this point. It's sad that doulas are still cranking out the same oppressive language. So if you have the energy to pour into somebody that is, on this lesser self-awareness level, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Where did you hear that from? Because in my understanding of advocacy, this is or whatever. And, just try to, but also remember typed words are just really hard to get a point across. And people are going to take what they want to take out of it in the attitude that they think you have also. So it's a lot of like work around, do I really, have the energy for this? And that's another level of self-awareness that I have worked on throughout the years, is if we're going to make these ripples in the professional space where we know that doulas are being taught wrong. I do the same exact thing I do with my clients and that I do with other doulas is, well, how do you feel about that information? Do you truly believe that doulas have a scope? Where did you learn that? And you'll get to the root of why people believe what they believe. And you just say, well, it's my understanding as a doula that this is my job and I do need to give my clients resources. Can I ask you in a sincere way, can I ask you what information you give your client, like what resources you give your clients? Because what if they ask you about something? Do you give them a list? Do you refer them, whatever? And really, if that person is on a teachable level and not a defense level, because I think for the most part, doulas that comment those kind of things are defensive. Like, she's confident in what she's doing. Why am I not confident in why I'm doing? Okay, we've got to have an attack here because I feel really insecure about what I'm doing. So instead of looking at it that way, be like, man, they really are needing to know more education on what I've learned. Again, do you have the energy to do that? Because it's sad. And it's sad that we're still in defense mode when everybody's just trying to serve birthing families. That's why we do that in the workshop. And it's, some people are going to be teachable, some people are not. And some people are going to believe what they do. And I have said over and over again, and big long threads, sometimes we can agree to disagree and you don't have to take what I have to say, but I'm not wrong. And if you believe I am, we just don't need to have any more conversations around this. And of course, there's going to be another attack, which is not a progressive conversation and will show you somebody's mindset about where they are.
I also am a huge believer in like attracts like. And if we're wanting more people like us, we just need to be who we are, and they're going to show up every time. And I don't want the reactionary people in my life, because I try really hard to be responsive instead of reactionary, because I think keeping the peace while also keeping good, healthy boundaries is a better position to be in, to hold space for a birthing family and a postpartum family for sure. Because we know in birth work, it's not simple and it's not easy. And if we're reactionary the whole time, the vibe's off, the hormones are off, and we're not building deep and connected relationships with each other and with our families.
I feel like that's something that I'm definitely still working on. After your workshop and also having a relationship with care, and even Lydia said it, we say what we feel is right, do what we feel is right, and not worry about what other people think of us. And even medical professionals, when I left the hospital and another one came in and had a talk with my client after I left, I was like, oh, they probably think I'm sitting in here trying to convince her not to do this. And my mind wants to be like, I don't like them to think that about me. That's not what I'm doing, da 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 da. And I'm just trying to help. That's not what I'm doing here. You don't understand me. Like,
But
I don't
see,
even have to like.
And it's the same thing. Like the story of they don't like me, they're projecting. My
Exactly.
story is I don't like her, she's not this. Like it's on both sides.
Yeah.
We have a story, they have a story. It is what it is. The only
Exactly.
story we can actually own is how I am in this moment and how I'm feeling. How they're taking it is their deal.
And
And I can
don't let somebody else make you feel inferior or insecure about what you're doing.
I'm working on it. It's hard. It's a hard, I think like I almost could cry, and I'm not going to cry on this podcast right now, but literally like, I think this is thing. I genuinely feel like being in this work, I'm just absolutely having to get, and it's okay, I'm happy about it, but ripped through my mental health journey because like, no, these things about myself, they're so strong within me. And while I'm trying to heal those things, at the same time, I'm having to try to totally show up for these families and put that aside. And it's very emotional to see the things that they're going through and try to get my shit right at the same time. And so this job is fucking hard.
But that's
Okay?
the,
It's
that's
the
the
real
beauty of it.
deal.
That's the beauty
Yeah,
of it. When you come into
it
birth
is.
work and you have those relationships are mirrors. So you're going
Yeah.
to see the best and the worst of yourself and really have to if you stay in the work and really dive into it's total self-care, self-help, self-everything, and
Yeah.
big self-awareness. And that is the beauty of the work. And it takes a lot of people out because it's too much. They're like, nope, not going to do that. And I get that. And I hit my vulnerability and level all the time. I like the challenge of it now, but I didn't at first. I was just like, I suck. I'm horrible. And I'm going to hold on to these beliefs with all I can. And then once you start dismantling those, you're like, whoa, those were even other people's stories. They weren't even what I
Straight up.
felt. You know, I mean, I always say doula work deserves and should honor a nice kick of a therapist on the side of us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Makes a huge
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Well, Traci, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to follow that except for I feel like as doulas, we do come into this work in a vulnerable state. We're super excited because we had just a wonderful birth and we want everybody to have that, or we have a traumatic birth and we want to save everybody from that, or we just have this deep, deep connection with birth and what it is and families, and we just want to hold space for them and we're so excited. But then we forget that we have to work on ourselves, and that's what we're talking about. And I want old doulas too and younger doulas to not be afraid, but older doulas to come into this too, thinking that we are always teachable. We are always learning. We are all on this journey of needing to be better for our families. And it's not easy for me. I don't want to come across as it is, but we definitely have to start with ourselves in the sense of what are my challenges? What are the things that I'm dealing with so that they don't overflow onto my families? It will always come up. It will always, we tell our families the same thing. You have to prepare for birth, because if you don't, something might get in the way that makes this labor not progressive. Same thing for doulas too. I don't want that to happen. So it is a work. It is not easy. We got to get out of this black and white thinking of I'm just going to take a training and I'm going to list it on my website and then I'm going to move forward. This isn't the balances. This is not spinning babies. This is not something that you're going to learn one time and then take in a birth in your back pocket. This is something that you absolutely have to commit to on a very deep level of self-awareness and understanding, as Jenna is experiencing, because this type of workshop, birth work, will show you who you are and are you ready to learn about yourself so that you can learn the most powerful part of birth work, and that's self-advocacy and advocating for families.
Absolutely agree. I just can't thank you enough for coming. It really made an indent in a positive way for our community. And I think all of us are continually learning and testing out things that are working, and and our exchange of ideas has been fantastic. Yeah,
I'm
it
so
was great.
thankful that I was able to take it. Like, I am a younger doula, and to have that, because I agree. Like I see other doulas and I'm just like, I feel at one hand, I always do want to learn, but it's hard to see people who don't. They're older, or you're not even like
Yeah.
older, but have more experience, and like have conversations with them. And they're like, oh, this is what I do. And that's the end of the conversation. And so as a new doula, when you're trying to learn and like find your place, especially in San Diego, when there's so many people and so many ways of doing things, it's so exhausting to look at people and be like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And I feel like Jen and I have this conversation every single time we go to a networking thing. We're like, oh my gosh, we're doing everything wrong. And I think we've kind of worked through that, where we don't have to follow so and so, or just because they have so many Instagram followers, or they're first on Google, or whatever it is. And I feel like we have been successful in our own ways, even though we've not been doing it that long. And I think just having this mindset so early on is only going to make it better when we are older and more experienced. And I hope, like, we've had this conversation, that we hope that if we stay in this community, that we will be able to help younger doulas feel the same way, and not the way we felt, or be so, I don't feel like myself as much, but definitely Jenna, like seeing her be like just so scattered, like all over the place, and be like, oh, so and so said that I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing that. And I'm like, okay. But I mean, I have that in my own way, but just, it's just overwhelming. And to
It's
be,
overwhelming.
just to be,
Mhm.
mind our own business and do what we need to
Yep.
do. And that's fine.
I'm super thankful for y'all's community and the communities where, where I get to go and see like the strength and safety in numbers and encouragement, the encouraging things that came out of those days, and watching y'all grow. But that's society too, right? It's like, if we're not doing something that everybody else is doing, or the illusion of social media numbers makes us who we are, which is a total illusion, right? So that's not your goal. Your goal is to serve your families one family at a time, one birth at a time. And that's it. That's it. And not thinking that if I could just get all of this information out to the masses, it would be so much better. No, you're changing lives the immediate time that you're with one-on-one with people. That is the powerful part. And I'm just super proud of y'all. And I'm thankful that every time somebody comes to these and take time out into my space, I'm like, really? Are you sure? Are you sure? Because you got to be strapped in. And I even told Jenna after that, I think it was that first day, I was like, I go around a room and I see who's going to have the most impact. And I was like, here it comes, Jenna. You ready? Here it comes.
It's still doing it.
Yeah.
What's so funny,
Yeah.
because every time we go to Kara's house, just really, her house is a portal that rips you through everything. And we had that whole week, we had hung out, and we just, I think it was like Wednesday before, I think that was our lunch. We were like, okay, well, we have to go home. I'll see you on Friday, because it's going to be a long weekend. And we knew it. We were talking about it the whole week, just how intense it was
Just
going to
mentally
be.
preparing.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
good. It's so good.
It is so good to, also hear. Thank y'all for the stories, and thank you for the messages even before, Lydia. I'm just, when I get a message and I'm just, I'm boohooing and I'm crying and I'm like, this is, it didn't start with me. I'm just giving what I have learned over the years also, and what I have seen. I'm giving you some of the things that might have originated with me, but I just can't wait to see this still ripple, and everybody, all the doulas that have taken the workshop, put their own talents and their own spins and their own, like, hey, Traci, I used this, but this is what I added, or these things that were able to come about, and get the word new out of your vocabulary. Anybody that listens to this, if you are a new doula, get it out, because I don't care if you just woke up yesterday and decided to serve families. You are that person who is the most important person on that team to that family, because of the relationship that we have. And that's the first start of getting past that oppression of, am I doing it right? Am I doing something wrong? Is thinking that we're still new. We are developing our skills and our gifts and our talents in birth work the way that we are supposed to. Everybody starts out like saying that they're new, but we're all on this journey of, how can I develop this better? And time doesn't matter. Time doesn't matter.
It only gets better because we start looking inward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Traci, where can everybody find you?
My website is tracidoula.com. I am on Instagram at Traci Doula, and I'm on TikTok at Traci Doula 4. Yeah, so those are the places I am, and yeah, it is super overwhelming, but I'm doing the gifts that I had years ago, and I actually asked for these places to be in. I'm like, hey, God, you have created me to be this person that has this neurodivergent brain that's never going to be able to hold down a 9 to 5 job. I am absolutely unmedicated because I can't take medicine well. And He has created that space for me to be in on social media and into the workshop space. So I'm very thankful for the spaces that are available nowadays, because I don't know where I would
Yeah.
have been
Well,
without those.
we are grateful too. We are definitely grateful too. And thank you, Lydia and Jenna, for being here today. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.